Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caroline Peters. I'm a gender and human rights activist from Bridgetown in Athlone. So when lockdown started on the 27th of March 2020, it was initially going to be 21 days. Everything was locked down. We were unsure what was going to happen. This was new. It was a new phenomenon that swept right across the world. And of course, when it reached our shores here in South Africa, it was scary. There was lots of anxiety around this. What is going to happen to us after the 27th of March? And I remember thinking at the time, I cried. When the president announced this, there was tears from many of us. The uncertainty that happened around this time was huge for all of us, not knowing what to expect. And of course, fear struck the Cape Flats. So on the first day of lockdown, I've never seen our community so quiet. You could hear the next door, you could hear the animals, you could hear things. And then of course, when day 2 started, again there was this eerie silence of uncertainty. However, from day 2, we saw people moving around in the township. Now remember, for many in the communities on the Cape Flats, they work from piecework, they hustle. And then, of course, they could not do that. We were all locked inside our homes. And on day 2, we saw how people moved around looking for food, coming to knock on the doors. Initially, as a community leader, of course, my home became that door that people came to knock at. And initially I said to everybody, no, you can't knock on my door, you can't come, we're all in lockdown. But I also realized that hunger is going to kill. So it was very unrealistic for many of the people in the community. For us that could go and shop and could go out and stock cupboards, that was the reality. But the reality, and remember, at this stage, many of the people in the communities, they rely on SASSA grants, on child grants, and so of course, by that time, SASSA didn't pay out yet. It was not month end yet. And so from day 7, I said, alone in the yard, we started to feed. And I went out and I went to buy dry ingredients to make this 100-liter pot of soup. And I put it into the boot of my car and I started driving around the community with the food. The uncertainty about who comes to the door, not spreading the virus. There was many things we had to learn and get used to. And at the second stop in the street, people came storming out, but I also saw the tears in the woman's eye. I saw, because I'm a gender activist and I've been working with GBV for over 30 years, I realized that this was not just tears of hunger, but it was the tears of a woman that was afraid and scared. And from day 7, when we started feeding, and then of course I spoke to the councillor, it was real. People was hungry. I had to let the people come out to our door to come for the soup then. And we started serving from day 7. But what I found was that women in the queue, marks in their faces. By day 8, a woman sat outside the door and she said to me, we were only going to serve in the afternoon, and she said to me, it is safer sitting outside here. I can tell him I'm waiting on food here. I cannot go home. Subsequently, that woman, the next day I said to her, we devised a safety plan. And so 4 days later, when she came here, we took her away to a shelter. And that was the pattern that we saw. Women were locked in were the abusers. And so what we also did, we started speaking in coded languages to women. We had the cook sister code. So you would ask me, and it went around, but it got so viral that we had to withdraw this campaign. But what it meant was that we would say, you would ask me, do you sell cook sisters? I say yes. And I'd say, what is your address? We deliver. So then I know that you are in trouble. And so we start chatting, I start checking in with you. When you ask me what the price is, I know I need to call the police, because by this stage I would have established where you stay, who's in the house. I would have spoken to you for a few times. And so we started to use the coded language. We started, we had to be innovative, because the feeding schemes or the soup kitchens where the women were coming to feed, we found women in the queue that would say, I cannot go home, don't you have money? My husband is going to hit me if I come home without money for him for his drugs. Remember, cigarettes were taken away. There were no drugs in the area. They couldn't move around freely. So what it meant, that the violence was internal now. So the gangster that used to be outside roaming around all day was locked in with his wife, with the children. And because we as the women were feeding the community from the community kitchens, but because also I'm a gender activist, and I started the support group for women. And of course the news spread that if you go and knock on their door, there'd be someone. And we removed women from the townships. Someone would phone in Hanover Park. One of the women who work in Hanover Park called me and said, Caroline, we have a situation here. So we literally rescued women from different areas on the Cape Flats, took them to a safe place. And so that is how our network started. So as the Cape Flats Women's Movement as well, we worked together. So WhatsApp, Zooms, it was so much to get used to. Getting used to the Zoom calls. Not everybody, remember, these were women that were working on the Cape Flats, just working in the community. Technology was new to them. And so, of course, all these other added things that they had to get used to and that. So through Women's Legal Center, I won't forget the rape with the 18-year-old at the homeless camp. I got a call in the middle of the night saying, my daughter is the ambulance driver taking this young woman, and there's nobody accompanying her. Because remember, at this stage, there were no support services. There was not Tutuzela and volunteers at Tutuzela Rape Care Center. And the wheels, then we all got in together. I then called, because of the networks, we could pull on the networks, made sure she's accompanied, someone is there with her in the middle of the night, go to the camp, go. And that is how the big, I'm going to stop there. You're going to edit it? Okay. And so that is how SAHRC got involved with the case, go and check up on what the camp was about, what's happened. The Saturday when we arrested the perpetrators, we accompanied her. We made sure she was supported right throughout the process, supporting her family. Even, remember, so she was an 18-year-old homeless young girl. She was on the road at the time, 18 years old. We saw the gross human rights violations. This young girl just got from Gugulethu to town. The truck came. They all were picked up and taken to the camp in Strandfontein. So literally she was a runaway, been away from home the day before, was picked up and then subsequently raped at the camp. And not supported. So what lockdown meant for many women was that they were locked in with the abusers. Remember, we have respite when we work. As workers, even if we go and work in a factory, if we go and work wherever it was, But for those few hours, women had their escape. And now she was locked in with perpetrators. Perpetrators were agitated because there was no drugs. The gangs couldn't even get together, congregate. So, of course, there was all this violence in the home. And then we started through a funded, and we started a support group for women in the area. It went for twice a week. Women would come for that 2-3 hours, just come and speak, just support each other, and it ended up great. I mean, we have seen women from that group that is now volunteers at the organization. We've seen women in that group who now has been empowered. They have their protection orders. One got divorced after 15 years in a very abusive marriage. We've seen how they claim their lives back, how the children is better emotionally, and as of course as the levels were eased up, there was more movement. We could do more things, go on hikes, take women out of the community just into the mountain, and that started a whole new world for these women. And so, of course, that was a great pilot, and though that work will continue in 2021. And so, yes, we fed our organization. We served until the first week in December. And even after we were so very careful of in the street, we have lines painted. There was always protocols observed, and sanitized, social distance kept, wearing of masks. So there's no mask, no food, no mask. I mean, we distributed close to 2,000 masks from our organization. So this whole area was flooded with masks. So and so we've always adhered strictly to COVID protocols. However, week the first week of December, after we've served our community, a few days later, both my daughter and I test positive for COVID. Okay, so after being very careful not to test positive, I think one of the things all year was, what if I tested positive for COVID-19? Our community, we're serving our community, and of course it was just grace. The second week in December, after we just closed our program for the year, myself and my daughter test positive for COVID. And of course, immediately there was this anxiety. We lost a close friend, a couple, Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, and this is the same time we are in isolation. We lost a family member, neighbors, but the closest person was my friend. And so, of course, the fear at the time, the anxieties. I think for me, I couldn't sleep at night. I sat up during the middle of the night, and my family would have video calls with me and beg me to sleep, but my fear was the death. And of course I was very ill, I was gravely ill, but my mind was strong, and I would sit up and pray and go in my daughter's room and pray with her, but it was very difficult. And so I also want to speak about isolation. I live in a 2-bedroom home, so I have a bedroom and my daughter has a bedroom. But we also know how difficult it was in a small home to isolate, and our home is relatively small, but it is not as small as a shack or as an informal settlement. And I think one of the biggest things that during that time of my isolation was, how do people isolate? that lives in smaller spaces than us. What happens? And nobody ever tell you the cost of COVID, what it cost us. So it cost us a lot of vitamins, a lot of vitamins and vegetables and fruit and just the immune boosters, the sanitizers, the liters and liters of sanitizers, of masks, of gloves, of just what it would be like, the cost of COVID. And I didn't realize the cost of COVID until it happened to our family. And what it meant was that also the meals, who comes and cook. You know, one of the things that we did as an organization during lockdown was that every family in Bridgetown, if you know there's a family, you send us the address, adults and children in the home, and so we would deliver meals every day to that household. And once I was in lockdown or isolated, I realized the huge advantage of that. We needed people to deliver meals to us. I was too sick. My daughter, on the other hand, that was not positive. It was a huge thing. Every time we use the bathroom needs to be sanitized. When we coming through, everywhere we went, our clothes, everything, all the time, it was sanitized and washed. And you know, so just those things, I think was really things that you cannot explain to someone that hasn't been COVID positive. So it was not just the time, but the money and the anxieties when my chest closed up, when I couldn't breathe, sitting up in the middle of the night, praying, being unable to breathe, watching my daughter, willing her to get out of bed. It was really, really hard. I think even in this time, it still makes me emotional when I think, and after 4 weeks, when I recovered, and then again, the fatigue that happens, the memory. Right now, I mean, there's words that's in my head that can't come to my mouth. And so you have mushy brains, you have the chronic fatigue that take weeks to recover. And just, I think, I only realized once I was positive the cost of COVID-19. Not just to us as a family, but to communities, to our government, to the authorities. And so, yeah, it's a huge cost. And not cost just in monetary, in emotions. I feel like I've lived for 2 years and without having a break. I feel like I've never had a break, like I've never been. It was just this constant being there for everybody. Who holds the community, you know? And so many people needed to be held, whether it was women, men, children in the community. You know, one of the things after, say, by level 3, when we started seeing clients, was also child rape. And we do not speak about that enough. The children that was locked in with abusers, the incest, what's happened in families. We have seen it, how those cases then came to the front when we got to level 3, how those cases were reported, of children that was locked in with abusers, child rapes by family members. Remember, with child abuse, child sexual abuse, 95% of the time, the perpetrators, it's not strangers. It's men that is known to the child. So our state of disaster has again been postponed until the 15th of March. And I have mixed feelings about that. On the one hand, I want to see our economy grow. I want to see a prosperous South Africa. I love South Africa. I love it. So if I look at the impact of this pandemic, just here on the Cape Flats, just around me, I can see it. You know, often people think, oh, we're on level 3 lockdown. It's not as bad as level 5. People are back at work. Yesterday I sat here and I probably had 10 inquiries for stationery. On the one hand, I can say, mothers, did you not realize, you know, your children are going to school? But then when it becomes to bread and butter issues, women lost their piecework, men lost their piecework. There is no more. I mean, if we look at the hospitality industry, how many of our women work there in the kitchens? So the laborers, so many shops have closed down, factories, clothing factories has closed down. So many mothers, and I mean, we know here on the Cape Flats how many single women headed households we have, you know. And I sat here and I was sad. I was sad that so many mothers don't have. Someone said to me, I can't send my child to school without stationery. I said, send the child. What can I give? A black pen, a pencil, you know, something like that. And so for me, the cost of this pandemic, as the middle class people, we are okay. We are okay because I work and I live and I work in a community where so many people are not okay. Where the cost of a bread is the same price for the child at stationery. I mean, I remember going to school and there was pencils that the teacher could hand out, you know. But I still believe I believe that there's enough of us that, you know, one of the things that we did here was a stationery drive, and I kept on saying to family, to friends, everybody, buy something extra when you're shopping the end of the month, you know, and that we hand out to children in communities. But the cost of this pandemic has affected us in so many different ways, you know. The trauma of people losing family members, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, you know. It was at one stage, Facebook read like an obituary. So the cost was huge. COVID-19, huge implications, you know. And I know that our government, yes, or there's been many things said about the government, which is true, but I also believe that there was a will to succeed, to fight COVID-19. Anytime there's so much negative being said, but I still feel strongly that our government did the best. And I really believe that our health systems. What are my views about the vaccine? Firstly, when the vaccine is here, I'm standing in that queue. My name's going to be on that list for the vaccine. I often say to people, it's a choice. Just as we have our babies vaccinated, we have babies from 6 weeks old vaccinated against many illnesses. And so why would we not vaccinate ourselves against the virus? And so if it not, yes, and take your baby. I always say, baby has a measles injections. Baby still develop measles. It just means that the baby's measles is not going to be as bad as what it would have been had the baby not been vaccinated. And that's how I see the vaccination for COVID-19. So again, yes, many things said about the failed vaccine. But as we know, the virus mutated and there's a different strain. I'm no scientist, but if you read, then you will know that it happened. It could have happened in any way because the virus mutated. And so at the time when the vaccine was bought, it was the right thing to do. But I'm excited, and I believe in my country. I believe in South Africa. I love my country. And so I know that we're going to find the vaccine that's going to help our people. And yeah, I'm looking forward to a country where COVID is still there, but we're able to live to live alongside COVID and not so many deaths.